This is a real-life review of the Nikon Z6 Mark III, a full-frame mirrorless camera many of us have been waiting for. In this video, I'm going to go through what's new inside, is the autofocus finally as good as it should be, and most importantly, should you upgrade if you have the Z6 Mark II? To answer these questions, I tested the Z6 Mark III at a nighttime running event, which was an ultimate test for the tracking autofocus and high ISO. I also took it into the gym where I photographed a personal trainer, and of course no camera review could be complete without cute dogs running around. Also, I will have a look at the video performance because this is where the camera really shines. During the whole testing period, I have been using the Nikon 70 to 180mm f2.8 lens, which I think is a perfect match for the Nikon Z6 Mark III. Don't waste your money on the 70 to 200 f2.8 version, it's heavy and expensive. So what's new in the Z6 Mark III? The sensor has the same megapixel count of 24 megapixels, but it is now a partially stacked CMOS sensor. Nikon claims only the top part and the bottom part are stacked, so this is to facilitate faster readouts. Personally, I think it was a wise decision from Nikon not to chase the megapixels and stick to the original 24 megapixels. On the body, there are two main changes. First, the screen became a fully articulated one. Some people hate this, some people like this. I completely understand if photographers don't really like this design, but I'm sure that the videographers will appreciate it. Also, if you're a photographer, in this design it's much better to shoot vertically if you have to put the camera down. Second big change, and I really love this, finally the preview, so the play button, is at the right place. Because until now on the professional Nikon Z cameras, this play button used to be on the top left. And when I'm shooting, I'm using my right hand, and for me it was so uncomfortable to raise my left hand up and press that preview or play button, especially if I'm using a tripod. So for me, I think it's a really good move that Nikon put this preview play button into the bottom right corner. This is a place where you can much more comfortably press the button because your thumb is already there. Apart from this, the body looks almost exactly the same as the Z6 Mark II, but it's a bit bulkier and has a deeper grip, and I had the same professional feeling as I've had with the Z8. And quite importantly, the grip is also quite deep enough so my pinky finger is not floating in the air, but it actually has space on the grip, and this way it's much more comfortable to hold the camera. Of course, the screen is fully touch sensitive. You can pick autofocus points by tapping on the screen, and you can swipe through the menu, and you can use the same finger gestures as you would use on a phone. And speaking of finger gestures, Nikon introduced a funny sounding but very useful feature. Finger flicks. Not finger licks, finger flicks. Here I took dozens of shots and I want to select the best ones. So with an upward flick of the finger, I can assign a custom rating to the photo. If I flick again, then it loses the rating. This is perfect! To activate this function, go to the Controls, Menu Settings, and within the full frame playback flicks, to the flick up movement, assign something that makes sense for you. For me, I usually like to pick the best ones and assign 5 stars, but you get the idea. But this is not the only way to assign rating within the camera. Finally, Nikon listened to the feedback that me and other reviewers said, and now it's possible to assign this custom function to any of the buttons. So if you are going through the images, if you would like to quickly assign like a 5-star rating, for example to this photo, I can just press it, just with a touch of a button, it gets the 5-star rating. So later it's much easier to select the images that I like. And I'm emphasizing this because on previous professional Nikon cameras, you couldn't assign 5-star rating to any of these function buttons. So this means that Nikon is actually listening to our feedback. Thank you. The drive mode button was sent up to the top left, so this is where the playback button used to be. And as with all high-end Nikons, you can customize the low speed option, and then there is the high and high extended speeds. This means that the Z6 III can shoot up to 14 frames per second with mechanical shutter, or 20 frames per second with electronic shutter. And in full-size JPEG, it can go up to 60 frames per second. It also has pre-release and post-capture options for maximum 1 second. But to be honest, I forgot to test this feature, sorry. Speaking of speed, if you activate the extended shutter speed option, you can have 1/16,000th of a second shutter speed using the electronic shutter. On the side of the camera, you will find a USB-C port with a power delivery option, a full-sized HDMI port, finally, this is a good one, a remote release port, and then audio in and audio out ports, making it ideal for videographers. On the other side, on the grip, you find the usual dual memory card slots. One slot for SD, one slot for CF Express cards, and you really should be using CF Express cards with this camera if you are up to serious videography work. As always, I'm very happy to see that there's a dedicated photo-video mode switch, and of course, if you switch into video mode, you can have a completely different eye menu than the eye menu in the photo mode. And of course, both of them are fully customizable. Talking about customization, on the front we have the same 2-function button as we are used to. I recommend you keep one of them as the main AF setting button. One thing some people are complaining about is the mode selector dial. You actually have to press that little button in the middle, then it unlocks, and then you can turn the dial. Some people like this, some people hate this. And now finally, let's see the Z6 Mark III in action. So the question is the autofocus finally on Sony levels, or at least on Z9, Z8 levels? Let's find out. First, let's see the eye autofocus performance, even in backlit situations with the lens focused to the infinity. The camera quickly located the face and the eyes and automatically tracked the eye closer to the camera. If there are more people in the frame, I can just use the joystick on the back of the camera to select which eye I would like to focus on. And by the way, you can see it was crazy backlit here. The sun was directly shining from behind her face, yet the focus was spot on. Now let's put the IAF more to the test. Here I photographed Bianca, a personal trainer in the gym that I go to. When I photographed her from further away as she was lunging, the IAF was still spot on. Of course, you have to be in continuous AF, AFC for the camera to track the eyes. So all these shots were 100% focused on the eye. By the way, I was constantly taking photos here, but you don't see that in the viewfinder because it's blackout free. Then I pushed the camera more to the limits and photographed her from the side, again quite a backlit scene, but to my surprise the Z6 Mark III found her eyes regardless. It's good news that the camera recognized her head from behind as well. This is something that older Nikons struggle with. And then she did these one-sided back pulls, and out of hundreds of photos in this session, here was the one and only shot that was a little bit misfocused. Unfortunately, it happened to be the best one from this sequence, but the overall AF accuracy is still pretty good. However, I think there's a pretty big bug in the AF system, as you will soon see. By default, the eye AF looks for the eyes within the whole frame, but what if you want to limit the area where it should be finding the eyes? Then there are these customizable wide area AF settings. You can customize the area by holding down the AF settings button and with the up and down arrows. Once you have the shape, you can move it around the frame. And now the camera will only try to find the eyes within this red box. But my problem is that although the camera finds the eyes within the box, it doesn't track them around the whole frame. For me, it would make perfect sense to just use this box to tell the camera, okay, this is where I want you to find the eyes, and then let the camera track that face or eye within the whole frame. I know for sure that Canon cameras, although they find it within the box, they track the subject during the whole frame. And I think it would be a very good future improvement, like firmware update for Nikon, to put this into the menu as a feature. So to track the eyes or subject around the whole frame, even if you have this wide area AF setting. You can say that the photo session was just a piece of cake for this camera because there were plenty of light, and you're absolutely right. To test the autofocus in low light, I photographed a nighttime running event at the Vajdahunyad Castle in Budapest, Hungary. First, I used the auto area AF with IAF enabled, and the camera found and tracked the only runner pretty well. Shots are focused. Even when there were a lot of people in the frame, the camera instinctively picked those faces that I would have also picked. The tracking was good most of the times. Bear in mind that this was at night, lit only by a few street lamps. You can see that the ISO is up in the clouds. Then I wanted to have more control over which face I tracked, so I switched into this new 3D tracking AF mode. And with this 3D tracking, I will have another improvement point for Nikon. But this is how this 3D tracking mode works. You put that white little box with the joystick anywhere, and once you activate autofocus, it's going to try to track that thing within the whole frame. So you kind of have to catch your subject with the box, and then the camera tracks it down. As you can see, it worked pretty well. Of course, the AF tracking box being on the face doesn't necessarily mean a well-focused shot, but in this case, the shots were well focused on her face, and I really like the happy and dedicated expression she had in spite of running a half marathon on a hot summer night. These ones are also in focus, they just have some motion blur because of the slow shutter speed. Alright, sometimes it indeed missed people, but it's a really extreme test due to the very low light. Most of the times it worked very well. For example, here I wanted to capture the runners as they high-fived with my son and other kids. Most of the cases, the tracking was fine, but there was some instances where it lost the subject. But here again, there was hardly any light here, so it would be unfair to judge its performance on this one. So here's the improvement point Nikon should address with a future firmware update. On my Nikon Z50, if I don't like the automatic AF area selection, I can just press the OK button and the tracking function instantly activates. This has saved me so many times. The fact that I don't have to turn dials and go to the different settings, I can just activate this tracking autofocus with a single button. I would love to be able to do the same thing with the Nikon Z6 Mark III, because if you want to activate this 3D tracking, you have to actually press the AF mode button and then turn the dials. I would like to have it just on one button. So hopefully Nikon will include this in a future firmware update. Let me know what you think. Is this a good idea? Let me know down in the comments. Of course, the autofocus can not only track humans, but it can also track animal eyes too. I was super impressed how it found the eyes right away with this dog, even though it was backlit and even though I could not see the dog's eyes, the camera could. And you can see the shot was 100% sharp. Then I tested the tracking accuracy on another furry quadruped. I asked the owner to call him in and let the camera track his face. Honestly, from this, I expected a little bit better performance. Overall, the box was constantly on the dog's eyes, but not all the shots were in completely focus. Still, I was able to capture some good ones, but I had a feeling that it could be doing better. At least the Nikon Z8 did a much better job with the 85mm f1.2 lens. It did a flawless job, but the Z6 III, I wouldn't say it did a flawless job on this one. To give credit for the Z6 Mark III, the IAF was 100% spot on when the dog was not running and even found the subject from weird angles. It's not clear from the menu, but the animal IAF works on birds too, so it recognizes them from different angles and locks on the eye. I only tested this function on birds showing up on my computer screen. So what do you think about the autofocus? Is it finally on Sony or on Canon levels? Let me know down in the comments. Alright, enough of the autofocus, let's see some high ISO samples. This is an ISO 1200 shot, or as we say in Europe, ISO 1200 shot. And yes, I'm showing the high ISO test on somebody's muscles. How about that? And this is an ISO 16000 shot with zero noise reduction. And this is when I applied artificial intelligence driven denoise in Lightroom. And to push things further, this is an ISO 51000 shot, which was pushed up in the post a little bit, but no noise reduction. And this is how it looks after the denoise function. So is the high ISO performance better? Well, this has not been a scientific test, but for me, what's even more important than the high ISO performance is the dynamic range. Here I deliberately underexpose the scene and then push it back in Lightroom. This is important when we expose for the highlights, but would love to bring back the details in the shadows. If I underexposed by 2 stops and pushed it back in post, you can hardly see any difference to a normally exposed ISO 100 shot. It is very clear and noise-free. The Z6 Mark III even handles +5 stops of pushing up, but of course noise is definitely visible here. As always, you can download many of these raw files at the link under the video so you can pixel peep for yourself. By the way, I took these shots standing on the walls of the Buddha castle, and this was a perfect place to test the built-in image stabilization. The 70-180mm lens doesn't have a stab. Only the sensor could counteract my handshake. The IBIS has normal and active mode, but what's new here is that now the IBIS can be centered around the used autofocus point. This is a really good feature because the IBIS has to work differently if your subject is in the middle or if it's in the very edge of the frame. And now the image stabilization will work centered on where the camera is focusing. Hand holding the lens at 70mm setting, I could consistently get sharp photos at 0.4 seconds, which corresponds to around 8 stops of effectiveness. This is really close to the 8.5 stops that Nikon claims. Now let's see the video performance. This is really where the camera got a lot of updates, and now it's perfectly suitable for the highest level professional work. You can really tell that Nikon recently acquired the camera company Red because the Z6 Mark III can record raw videos internally up to 6K. No need to have an HDMI recorder, you can directly record raw video onto the CF Express cards. I want to read the whole list of video specs for you, but you can have videos up to 6K resolution in many different codecs and color profiles. You also have the option for 4K 120 frames per second video and also in RAW format. Of course, in every video setting, you will still have the same IAF as in the photo mode. But above all, I really like the normal standard profile footage that just comes out of the camera unedited.
The colors are very realistic, they are lively but not too saturated, and by the way, these are all shots of Budapest overlooking the chain bridge from the Buda castle. The skin tones are really pleasing, and ultimately this is what we want to have. A good looking video straight out of the camera, and the Nikon Z6 Mark III definitely delivers.
If you would like to see a more detailed videography review of the Nikon Z6 Mark III, make sure to check out my fellow YouTuber Casey's video from Camera Conspiracies. He did a lot better wildlife video testing than I did here. In summary, the Nikon Z6 Mark III is a very well built, fully customizable camera that can be good for event, sport and nature photographers. It is also fully suitable for high-level professional videography work due to the 6K RAW output. So the question is, should you upgrade to Z6 Mark III if you have the Z6 Mark II? Well, if you are mostly shooting landscapes, I don't really see the point. But if you are shooting a lot of people, events, wildlife, then I would definitely upgrade, because the improved autofocus will make your life so much easier. That was my Nikon Z6 Mark III review. Don't forget that you can download many of the RAW files at the link under the video. And if you buy a Nikon Z6 Mark III, then congratulations, but the settings it comes out of the box, it's not the most ideal. So watch this video to see which features should you turn on and off.